When it comes to children, the world is better off without them. And if you needed any more persuasion, well, this movie should serve adequately enough. Written and directed by Scott Strimmer, today we'll be covering Found, a movie based on the novel by the same name by Todd Rigney, but due to my inability to read, the movie is what we'll be focusing on today. The movie begins with the standard American suburban experience of a 12-year-old boy named Marty telling us, the audience, about that time he found a severed head in his brother's closet. Every few days or so, Marty's older brother Steve likes to rotate out the old heads for a new one because he doesn't like the way they stare at him. Like any normal, well-adjusted member of society, Marty has quite the fascination with dead bodies and can't seem to stop touching them. Entering his brother's closet every few days and opening his bowling ball bag, he finds a rather strange bowling ball in the form of a woman's head. Because it seems what Steve looks for most in a girl is the brains. This is what they mean when they say they're more interested in what's going on in your mind than your looks. Marty misses the person his brother was, and not the person he currently is. That being, the person who almost exclusively targets black women because he's only racist when it comes to murder. In school, Marty's picked on by a kid named Marcus, and after being tormented by him and accosted in the bathroom, Marcus punches Marty in the stomach because screw that organ in particular. Because of this, Marty gets to take the rest of the day off school because being beaten is tiring work, which gives him the perfect opportunity to engage in one of his favourite pastimes: touching stinky corpses. But after finding the bag empty, he decides instead to wear his brother's gas mask to be prepared just in case the Germans fly over. Rather predictably, he's almost immediately caught by his psychotic and also racist brother, who proceeds to get a little bit upset with how well Marty can pull it off. But he manages to cool down enough for Marty to begin talking to him about what happened and explaining what went down at school today, with this being one of the rare times he's actually been able to have some sort of connection with his brother, as he's usually a bit busy, out getting some head. Steve gives him the expected advice from an older brother, which is stick up for yourself and fight back, which is easier said than done for Marty, considering that advice is coming from the guy who likes to spend his spare time relieving people of their spare body parts. But body parts, schmoddy parts. There's more important things to be thinking about right now, like dinner. A dinner where we also just happen to learn that Marty and Steve's father is also a racist because he values those traditional and old family values of being a horrible person, with Marty's mother being the type of person to tolerate these hateful things being said in her home, putting up little to no resistance, simply to keep up the illusion of a simple and happy family, with Marty not being so easily swayed when it comes to those views, with him later saying something along the lines of just because it was one person, it doesn't mean it's an entire race. Marty's told that he can miss school again tomorrow, because who really needs that anyway, and is instead taken to the video store by his mother to rent a few movies for the night, for when his friend Daniel comes over to work on the graphic novel they've both been creating. And amongst the movies he's chosen for the night, one is named Headless, but unfortunately for him, it appears to be missing for its case, and they don't have another copy. But rather luckily for Marty, not only is his big brother Steve a racist homicidal maniac, but he's also a thief. Because after hiding in Steve's room one night when he really shouldn't be in there, Steve comes home while Marty is under the bed doing his best impression of a cockroach, and is forced to listen to Steve repeatedly talking to himself in the mirror as if he's some kind of normal person who's got friends to talk to, and not some strange weirdo that keeps human heads for company. But in the room, Marty finds the missing video from the movie store, with a note in the case referencing specific time codes for easy access to watch the most disturbing parts. And once David comes over, the pair proceed to watch the movie, which doesn't seem to impress David. It's nothing but a series of grotesque and horrific killings with no story connecting it. In the movie, one of the killer's go-to moves is to scoop out the eyes of the deceased women and to use the holes for things he really shouldn't do. A scene that originally got the movie banned in Australia due to the Australians' extreme phobia of female eyes. But while David is disappointed with the boring gore fest, Marty can't help but be disturbed to his core at the thought of Steve using this movie for his very own inspiration due to the killer cutting off his victims' heads and keeping them in a bowling bag. Headless being a fake movie that was actually turned into a real movie not too long after Found's release, due to being independently made and fan-funded through Kickstarter by Arthur Cullifer, the special effects supervisor and associate producer for this movie, a movie that perhaps one day I'll cover for all of you extra hole enthusiasts out there. After being left feeling disappointed with the movie, David proceeds to do the classic best friend thing of being absolutely horrible to Marty, with him eventually saying that he doesn't want to be his friend or to associate with him anymore due to the fact that he gets picked on for being seen with Marty. Marty, knowing a really good way to keep a friend around, decides to show him something really cool in the form of a currently not alive person's head. After heading into his brother's room to retrieve the head, he has David open the bag to discover that it's currently containing the head of Marcus, as he's been feeling a little lightheaded lately. And much like the woman that they just watched in the movie, Marcus's eyes have been removed for reasons that don't bear thinking about. David, not exactly being cool with the whole removing the skulls of your enemy thing, proceeds to freak out, with Marty telling him that Steve will kill him if he dares tell anyone, because this is what happens to the people who pick on him. But before Marty has the opportunity to put it back before Steve comes home, Steve does just that, and there's no way for Marty to hide it from him. And despite living in the very same house as each other, and having countless, if not infinite chances to discuss this matter privately, Steve proceeds to follow Marty to the movie theater the next day, where he confronts him in the bathroom about it, as this guy in bathrooms mix about as well as my digestive system and dairy. Steve tells him that if he or David tells anyone, then that he's going to have to kill both of them, but he'll probably have to squint his eyes and pretend that they have a different skin color. After heading to the local junkyard the next day to burn the graphic novel that he and David had been creating, he decides to take a midday nap beneath an old unused train cart like some kind of homeless 12-year-old suburban kid, when suddenly he's woken up by Steve, who's looking for him, as he appears to have once again forgotten that they share the same household. He runs away from him, but Steve eventually manages to catch up due to Marty's plan being foiled by attempting to headbutt the ground for some reason. But instead of hurting or scaring Marty, he decides to talk to him. Just like their father, Steve is also a racist, and most of his victims are black because he despises them. He thinks that he's doing the world some sort of service by committing these acts, a fact that Marty has already pointed holes in due to him narrating to the viewers back in the beginning of the movie that he once found the head of a white woman instead, meaning that Steve just uses this as some sort of poorly veiled excuse to commit his murderous fantasies. But instead of being frightened or disgusted by his brother's actions and complete and utter lack of empathy, he instead embraces him and gives him a big hug, thanking him for killing Marcus, because as messed up as this situation is, this is perhaps the closest thing that the pair have had to a heart-to-heart in a very long time. Taking the things that his big brother had told him to heart, the next day, while attending an outdoor church service with his mother, because Jesus forgot to pay the rent that month, he's approached by one of the kids from his school. Much like Marcus and many of the other kids from Marty's school, the child proceeds to belittle him and make fun of him simply because he can get away with it. But Marty, finally having enough of being everyone's physical and mental punching bag, retaliates to being tripped over and mocked by smashing this person's face into a tree. He's discovered by the adults as he's mercilessly beating this boy for being a little twat. Marty decides to himself that he no longer cares about the consequences and that it's time he starts looking after himself. So when the kid is brought to Marty by his mother to apologize for the mean things he was saying to him, Marty responds to the apology by saying, "If you do it again, then I'll beat you again." And for the cherry on top, he tells him to go to hell. He's smacked in the face by his mother, and for standing up for himself for the first time in his life, this 12-year-old little boy is punched in the face by his own father before being smacked around by him, because it turns out that he's also racist against children. Steve decides to stick up for his little brother, and after being pushed over by his father, responds by repeatedly punching him in the face. Because of this, Steve's kicked out of the house because it's kinda hard to ground a serial killer, and returns later that night to tell Marty that he's going to kill their parents so that they can both be finally free. And by finally free, he means Marty being forced into the childcare system for the rest of his childhood while being severely psychologically damaged. They start arguing about it because Marty's like, maybe don't do that, and after their father comes out to investigate the commotion, Steve hits him over the head with a shovel before bludgeoning him again. After giving his dad a high five to the face but wrong, he chases after his mother, where Marty catches him laughing while inappropriately touching her. Steve knocks her out and licks her neck, because he's just a bit abnormal like that, before proceeding to become even more abnormal by unzipping his trousers. Marty runs towards him and knocks him to the floor, as just because he came out of it once, that doesn't mean he gets to go back in. Steve knocks him out, and Marty wakes up, gagged and restrained to Steve's bed, while hearing the screams of his mother and the shouts of his father in the distance. Steve walks into the room, completely naked apart from the gas mask he's wearing, to retrieve his machete from the closet. After leaving the room, the loud, frantic screams of his mother suddenly come to a stop. He can then be heard mocking his father, making fun of the fact that his mother is now dead, before his screams fall silent as well. Once Steve's done speedrunning his inheritance, he walks into the room naked and covered in blood, and proceeds to try and comfort Marty by telling him by morning he will understand everything, followed by Marty not understanding anything, as Marty doesn't quite have the reaction that Steve was hoping for. Steve thought that his brother would be happy to be free of his parents, which causes him to start freaking out more than he currently is, as he seems to be more upset with the fact that he's made his little brother sad than the fact that he's just chopped down half of his family tree. It's more of a family bush now. Once morning arrives, Steve proceeds to streak around the neighborhood while covered in blood and various internal parts of his parents, before cutting back to Marty still in bed, but this time accompanied by the butchered remains of his parents as they lay next to him in pieces on the bed, and the movie comes to its wholesome end. A movie that I can certainly say does indeed exist, and a movie that suffers from the unfortunate side effect of featuring child actors, because child actors are children, and children are annoying. And that's coming from someone who used to be one. Before this video comes to an end, I'd just like to give a massive shout out and a big thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who continue to go out of their way every month to help support the channel when YouTube isn't exactly fond of the type of movies I cover. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or a patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great support, but you also get access to a few little perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to all uncensored versions of videos going forward. So starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to Aaron R, GB Hub, Adam Benidi, Taiki, Praz, Pedro Manfrenanti Martindale, Saganth Vandavaran, Eli and Osland, Ash B, Hey It's Ethan, Luna Chan, Ethan Shannon, Nick K, Daniel Keelan, Snot21, TRC, The Soldier 420, Zaza Lord, Hull Horse, Kieran P, Christoph Sturm, Mike Carasno, MDL 404, Sean Farrier, Ruben Brooks, Hadrian Espic, Melquier Tabone, Lockie, Kate, and Nocturnal. And now heading over to this week's new Patreon signups, a big thank you to Everett Langevin, Corvain, CBS Racer, Andrew Page, Vision Esports, B. McGregor, Mikirio Suzuki, Vivi, Dexter D0, Lucas, Adim Jones, Chris Felder, Roger Melee, Wendy Castro, Alexandre Biori, Nathan, Robin Fortkins, Jesse Taylor, Hannah E. Grossi, Chai, Paoli Ossel, Frog Diet, Octavio Martinez, Shabazz Khan, Alex Fernandez, Harv, Jess, Jeffrey DeBreeze, Andrew Matthews, Ryan, Rayvoon Foster, David Alejandro Moreno, Roland Nye, Guy DK, Robin, Victor Lucas Forgerat, Caleb Campbell, Professor Moxie, Nibs the Mouse, Sirius, and Ghost Hattie. So once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.